Order, order. Can I welcome our witnesses here today as part of our inquiry into the contractual arrangements that the Home Office has for the delivery of asylum accommodation? To be clear, we're not looking at the policy around asylum, and we're not making comments on that. It's purely about the contractual arrangements and the way the Home Office manages them. I'm going to let the witnesses each introduce themselves, and then we'll go into questioning. So perhaps we start with you, Mr. Lakey.
Hi, Managing Director for Clearsprings Management. I'm the Group Managing Director. My name is Steve Lakey.
Thanks. Afternoon, everybody. My name is Jason Burt. I'm Group Director for Health, Safety and Compliance for Mears plc.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Claudia Sturt. I'm the Prisons and Immigration Director for Serco for the UK and Europe.
Thank you. Thank you. And then we'll start the questions with Margaret Malone.
Thank you, Chair. As you know, the Home Office's goal is ending hotel use and getting dispersal accommodation. To all of you, would you think that hotels have been more profitable for contract providers than dispersal accommodation? And if so, why is housing asylum seekers in hotels more profitable than using dispersal accommodation, would you say?
I don't know who wants to start. Shall we start with the same order again?
Yes. Shall I start?
Yes, please.
Yes, of course. So I think this probably goes back to the beginning of the contracts in 2019 when the costings were put together for dispersed accommodation and before there was a requirement at the time for large-scale hotel emergency accommodation. And those costings were put together at a time when the LHA rates for dispersed accommodation were relatively low, and they've since been adjusted since then. So the pricing was for dispersed in-community self-catering accommodation. The emergency hotel accommodation is more expensive by its nature because it's fully catered and the emergency nature of standing it up and its type. So it's therefore more expensive. That also came in at a later point in the contract. So the contract started in 2019. We then moved to hotels. So we were able to put the pricing forward for hotels at a different rate to that which was originally done for dispersed accommodation. So yes, temporary emergency accommodation is more profitable than longer term dispersed accommodation. But there's a big push and lots of work to try and reduce the hotels and increase the DA.
Anyone want to add anything?
That was a very comprehensive answer. I don't think I've got much to add to that. Thank you.
Now, I think I would just add from Mears' perspective, following on a little bit from what Steve said, in the sense of when we pitched for the contract originally, we didn't factor in using hotels and hotels and the emergency contingency accommodation was something that we had to take on board as a result of the pandemic. There are greater challenges associated with the use of hotels and increased cost, but from our perspective in terms of the sort of contractual pricing, our approach to pricing in relation to the hotels and DA is neutral, it's the same.
Okay, thank you. And could I ask Steve, given that the use of hotels has significantly increased, what do you think and motivation would Clearsprings have to shift away from that and to deliver cheaper dispersal accommodation?
I can certainly answer that, absolutely. So hotels have been useful as an immediate need for people when they need a bed straight away or they need accommodation straight away, but they're really bad for people that have to stay there for a long period of time. So really for us, the key motivation is longevity. We've been delivering these contracts since 2000, and we're really keen to continue to do that. And we think the right way to do that is through dispersed accommodation, trying to get away from catered accommodation into self-catering accommodation. So the big push for us really is to try and get back to where we've got people in self-catered dispersed accommodation and only needing to be in that initial accommodation for a very short period of time.
So as Clearsprings, you would say that you are motivated, that is one of your prime motivations?
Absolutely, yes, and a key strategy for us as well.
Okay. And if I could ask, last question, why would you say there's a higher concentration of hotels in London and the South East than in other regions?
Sure, it's two things, I think. One is the majority of arrivals come into the southeast. So in terms of being at the location for Kent intake unit and for Croydon intake unit, then they're the main arrival centres, plus all the airports. We've got quite a few of those too for arrivals. Plus, it was just availability. So a lot of our hotels are around the airports. So where there are main airports and main ports, that's where we've got lots of hotels, lots of availability for them. So we were able to stand them up.
So with your motivation in your last answer, you're going to be doing work because I wouldn't imagine those locations have dramatically changed, airports, Kent, that kind of thing as well. So how do you think you're going to do that?
So we've proposed, and we're talking to the Home Office about it at the moment, some what's called overflow dispersed accommodation. So it's a slightly different variant on self-catering DA accommodation. We've got about 15,000 bed spaces that we've proposed that could be utilised to replace hotels directly, much more affordable, much more akin to dispersed accommodation, and most importantly, self-catering and in community, so less of a draw than hotels.
Thank you.
Chris Murray.
Thanks very much for coming today. The statistics show us that in 20... Oh, sorry, thank you. Can I just draw everyone's attention to my register of interests and the support that my office receives from the Refugee and Migration Partnership? Thank you, Chair. Keeping us right. So the statistics tell us that in 2020, the average cost was $17,000 per asylum seeker per year to the Home Office for the accommodation provided by your three companies. By 2024, that had risen to $41,000 per asylum seeker per year. How do you account for that huge growth? And do you know what proportion of that per asylum seeker per year by 2024 was going in profits to your companies? I'll show it one by one.
Start with me again? Yeah. No problem at all, I'd be happy to. So, yes, in terms of profit for us, I can only talk for Clearsprings, of course, but our profits on average are around 6.9%. Contractually, we're only allowed to make just over 5% in profit before that's then shared back with the Home Office as part of the profit share mechanism. So anything over and above that amount would go back. So our margins have gone up slightly. We've gone up over the 5 years from around 3-4% to, as I say, around 6.9%, with anything over just over 5 being shared back in terms of profit. I think the other question was around the cost differential between the two, and again, it comes back to that full board, fully catered, security, services on site versus a self-catering property in community, which is a very, very different prospect, and that's the main reason for the difference.
Yeah, so from Mears' perspective, our profit margin over the existence of the contract is in the region of our announced range of 5 to 6%. I acknowledge that the NAO report contains some figures which are in excess of that range, but I think it's important to note that those figures don't take into account the degree of profit that needs to be paid back in terms of the profit share that Steve alluded to. From Mears' perspective, obviously we operate in 3 regions. Each region is looked at on an independent basis in terms of performance. We have Northern Ireland, Scotland and North East Yorkshire Humber. Of those 3 contracts, we are in profit, if you like, in 2. We are in underage in 1, Scotland. So overall, I think our net margin is in the region of 5 to 6%, and we have in the region of 13.8 million to come back in profit share. I think that figure is the figure that we've given to Home Office, and it's currently being undergoing the audit process.
Monsieur?
Yes, so you asked first of all about how I would what analysis I'd give about why costs have increased. I suppose the big driver there is the growth in the use of hotels, which, as my colleague said, it is more expensive than self-catered private rental accommodation. I think as you push out from densely populated urban areas to find accommodation further out to try and create a greater spread. You end up going to areas where the rental costs are higher, where you're dealing with the impact of rurality, increased transportation costs and so on. I'm going to draw on the NAO reported profit, which seems to me to have the greatest validity here, and they assess us as, over the life of the contract, an average of 7% margin on our revenue. We are not yet in scope for profit share at Serco.
Okay, thanks very much. So when discussing the asylum accommodation system, the Prime Minister called it eye-wateringly expensive. His predecessor, the previous Prime Minister, called it unacceptable. The Home Secretary called it an appalling waste of taxpayers' money. And the Leader of the Opposition said the whole system is broken. Those four people rarely agree on much. So I wonder, do you share their analysis, or how would you describe this system?
Well, shall I take that one? In terms of the overall position of the contract position, I think the premise of it is reasonable from Home Office's perspective. It includes quite, stringent performance requirement. It includes opportunities for penalties to be levied for non-conformance. So it incentivises operators to hit the targets that are set of them. It permits profit share. So if an operator does reach the thresholds that we've been talking about, then there's an opportunity to recover. And equally, it doesn't give any downside to the Home Office in terms of potential underage. So the risk is borne by the operators. Obviously, the numbers are huge. It is a problematic situation, I think, for the country. It's clear that something needs to be done about it. For our part, we did not envisage using hotels, and I think hotel expense is probably one of the biggest elements of it. We've certainly worked hard to help Home Office deliver its expectations and remove, and I think we're only operating about 18% of our estate now is in hotel accommodation. That's 18% of about 26,000 across the three regions, and we've come down from about 85 hotels to currently 40, but we are expecting to exit another 4 within the next few weeks, so we'll be down in the region of about 36. DA expenditure will hopefully help contain it, but equally I don't think it's necessarily in its own right the magic bullet. That more people are coming in and they're in the system for longer, so it's a tricky thing to solve. Unfortunately, I don't feel like I've got the solution for you, but we will endeavour to do what we can to assist the Home Office to bring those costs down.
Okay, so I think you're saying, from your perspective, the system works pretty well, but you can understand why politicians think otherwise. Do you two agree with that analysis? Do you think the system's working relatively well from your perspective?
I think the politics of it are not for us as providers to engage with. I absolutely accept that this is a very high cost to the UK taxpayer, and certainly the volumes that we've seen, particularly post-2016, have driven that cost higher and higher. I think it's really incumbent on us as providers to be always mindful of value, to be looking for ways to offer greater value for the money that we receive. This is a really complex and challenging delivery landscape. This is difficult stuff to do, and the Home Office sets quite stringent contractual terms and quite highly defined specifications for what they want us to provide, and whilst we are meeting those requirements, there is cost involved in that. Our job is to make sure that the value is as high as it can be relative to the cost.
Nothing else to add to that. I think that captures it.
Or Cola.
Can I refer participants to my register of interests? As the committee are already aware, one of my donors, namely Safwan Adam, has a commercial interest in Stay Belvedere Hotels, who have been a subcontractor to Clearsprings and who are likely to be referred to in today's proceedings. Can I push you a bit on the profit, 7% profit? When the contracts were determined, the assumption would be most of it would be in dispersal accommodation. Vast amounts are now going to far more expensive contingency hotels, contingency accommodation. The costs are higher, therefore 7% of that higher turnover is a huge bonus to you, isn't it, in comparison to what was assumed to be the case when the contracts were first established?
In terms of the headline numbers, obviously they have gone up significantly through increased numbers coming through the system. I don't think that necessarily flows into increased profit for the operators per se. I think the important element of that is the anticipated margin, and I think the NAO acknowledge that actually the range of margins demonstrated by the operators are at the lower end of expectation, and as I said before, and even certainly so far as Mears is concerned, the numbers quoted are in the real world will be lower than that once the profit share mechanism has been applied. But obviously it has led to an increase in profits because we are doing more than we expected.
Do you want to offer any other comments?
So I guess just from a Clearsprings perspective, yes, it generates more cash because the numbers are bigger in terms of that amount. And for Clearsprings, we have that in the group account ready to reinvest back into a number of projects, including social housing, finding additional dispersed accommodation, bringing some properties back online that are in disrepair at the moment. So it gives us an opportunity to invest back in to try and find solutions to getting more dispersed accommodation on board, reducing the need for hotels.
Yes, I think it might be helpful as an illustration that 3/4 of our service users are in dispersed accommodation. So very much sort of the bulk of the people that we're accommodating, we are accommodating in private rental accommodation, not hotels. I think it's also just worth understanding that whilst the income per service user in hotels is higher, so are the costs of delivering them, but we also bear the cost of any void accommodation, any private rental accommodation that is not currently occupied. We bear the cost of that. So there is an incentive to move people from hotels into the private rental sector, which we are paying for, and we it's helpful to us to then get the revenue from.
You're getting a full amount for the hotels, no matter how many people are in them, aren't you? Because the hotels are done on the basis of how much they can accommodate. So you're doing far better out of that deal than losing out of it, because you maximise. You're putting them into a dispersal accommodation where you have to, because you'll be penalised. You don't get penalised about taking them out of hotel accommodation, do you?
We
are penalised if we can't place people in accommodation.
Different question. That's not the question I asked.
No, we're penalised for that. So it's essential that we maintain enough accommodation of the various different types to be able to ensure that we can offer places. Hotels are generate higher revenue
even if they're empty.
Accommodation. But empty dispersed accommodation is a cost to us as well.
Empty hotels are a profit to you in the same way. There's no... it's all accepted, isn't it, by all of you, that you get more cash out of the hotels than out of dispersal accommodation. Yeah? Yes? You accept that?
Revenue is higher, yes.
Talk me through why you say you're incentivised to get people into dispersal accommodation. And what does Graham King think about the idea that you want to get all of it into dispersal accommodation when your profits are coming, your cash, not your percentage, but your cash is coming from the the contingency hotels?
I can talk from our perspective on that one, and it is about longevity of contract. So yes, it gives us immediate cash now, but we're not providing a product that our customer, the Home Office, particularly wants, because they want dispersed accommodation. We want to be in for the long game, for a long period of time. We only do that by meeting our customers' need, and the need is to get more dispersed accommodation, have less hotels. Also, we are penalised for not providing sufficient dispersed accommodation, and again, if there are voids in those hotels, if there are empty rooms in those hotels, if there are rooms down for repairs, then there are mechanisms that the Home Office can apply to get the money back for that. But fundamentally, in terms of what drives us, it's not the cash today, it is the longevity of business, the fact that sustainable business for this particular cohort is about providing dispersed accommodation, not leaving people languishing in expensive hotels for long periods of time.
Yeah, I would echo what Claudia and Steve have said, and again highlight that from Mears' perspective, when we pitched for the contract, we were not envisaging leaning on hotels or utilising hotels at all. We are determined to reduce our reliance on hotels, and I think our track record has demonstrated that we've had some success in that range.
You weren't envisaging it, but you've been amply compensated for it because it's increased your profits.
Well, we've been providing Home Office with a service that needed to be provided in very challenging circumstances. I think it's very easy to forget the world that we were living in when COVID landed and the challenges that brought and the additional requirements that put on the operators to keep people safe, their people, our service users safe. And that was a situation that nobody really foresaw. We're through that now, fortunately, and we are now trying to get back to what we hoped would be our business as usual position. We've provided a service, and it's a service. It's a greater service than we thought because the numbers are higher and people are in the system probably longer than was anticipated.
We're an organisation that offers business services to government, and we live or die by our ability to provide governments with the services that they want and that they need and that they think provide them with decent value for money. And as Steve said, we would not be well served by going for the quick buck now and running out of goodwill with the government, our customers. So longevity is a very serious point to us, and it must be said, I have a lot of conversations with senior people in the Home Office, and conversations that don't include their determination to reduce and eventually cease the use of hotels. Such conversations are very few and far between. They are absolutely focused on reducing the use of hotels, and we are very, very clear that is what they want us to do. Hence, we've reduced our hotel occupancy by 50% in the past year.
It's still being paid for those hotels?
We're being paid for a service that we're providing. Yes.
Those hotels, what are the contracts for the hotels? How long are they? How long are these hotels?
I'm sorry.
How long do you have these contracts for the hotels? How long have you contracted with the Home Office to supply the hotels?
I think that varies.
Sorry?
I believe that varies.
Are these short-term or long-term contracts?
So I can probably assist on this. Yeah, for the most part, they're on a 3-month rolling contract, so it's short term. Obviously, from the commercial world, you need to give hotel operators some warning of a change, but the reality of the situation is that they're on short notice. If Home Office require a hotel to be closed, or we're in a position to close it, then that can be achieved relatively quickly.
So Sean Davis and Belle Ribeiro Addy want to come in. So if I bring you both in, and then perhaps we can take those two questions together.
Thank you. You've mentioned this sort of profit share back to the Home Office. Can you each tell me how much money you've paid back to the Home Office in profit share each year for the last few years, please?
So total probably since the beginning of the contract is easier for me, if that's okay, which is 32 million for us. It's gone through a review process with the Home Office. They have to audit it and make sure that it's correct. So we're waiting for them to conclude that, and then 32 million is ready to go.
When was that last payment? When was the last year that payment covered?
That would be 23-24. I don't think the 24-25 one is in yet.
Is it good?
We haven't paid any money back, actually parted with any cash as yet. We've got no, because our requirement is the contract, the profit sharing mechanism is a cumulative, so it builds up over the course of the contract. As I said, we've got 13.8 million, which is due to go back subject to Home Office audit. That there for two of our regions. In one region, Scotland, we are running at an underage of £23 million, which we are funding. So there is an element of swings and roundabouts to this. Obviously, that number is a snapshot in time, and as the contract progresses, now that we're at the threshold, the amount of money that we're required to pay back will vary and increase moving forward.
Despite your recognition in your opening the opening answers to the opening questions that you have exceeded the contract profit margin, and that your expectation is that you should pay the Home Office some funding back. You haven't paid £1 back to the Home Office yet, is that correct?
The mechanism for paying back is driven by Home Office. So we declare our numbers. Home Office then check those numbers and then recover the monies. And that's where we are at the moment. So Home Office are auditing our
We've heard from Mr. Lakey that his company's paid £32 million back.
Apologies, no. So we are in the same position.
So you haven't paid £1. You've not paid £1 back to the Home Office yet.
The money's all there, ready to go. It's been audited. We are waiting for the Home Office to take the money.
Mr. Burt, what's your assessment of how much money you will have to pay the Home Office back once they?
I think it's very difficult to forecast moving forward because
it's over multiple financial years, isn't it?
Yes, it will add up. As I say, in Scotland, for example, we're significantly behind. We're running at 23 million loss. Northern Ireland and North East Yorkshire and Humber, we've met that threshold, and that will continue. Now, obviously, it depends on numbers, how many people are in the system.
Okay, but you haven't. But you have not paid anything back, and the assessment has not been agreed with the Home Office as yet.
No.
How about yourself?
So we are not yet in scope for profit share. Our profits.
You haven't made enough profit.
We haven't come into scope. No, we've not yet made sufficient profit for that to be an issue for us.
And how much profit have you made up until this point, which on the contract?
So working on the 7% NAO figure.
Well, how much is on your figure? Well, you must know how much, as a company, you must know how much profit you've made off this contract.
We're currently being audited, so I would much rather rely on the NAO figure. But
astonishing, isn't it astonishing? You'd rather rely on the National Audit Office to tell you how much your company has made in profit, rather than tell me what your estimate of profit is on this contract.
Well, so I can tell you what our estimate is based on a 10-year contract at 7%.
Yes.
That would, if 5.5 billion is the 10-year figure as assessed likely by the National Audit Office, that the sort of the round figure would be 385 million.
385 million on the National Audit Office figures. What about your figures? What's your estimate to your shareholders and to your internal executives and so forth? What is the profit expectation on this contract to date?
I'm sorry, but I'm working on the figure of 7%.
Right. So do you agree with the National Audit Office figures, or are you just relying upon them?
I have no reason not to agree with them.
Well, people will take from that what they will. Just in terms of Mr. Lakey and Mr. Burt, you haven't declared all your profit margins for certain years, have you?
As far as I know, we have.
There's certain years in certain regions where you haven't.
I did see that. We'll be challenging that. And
you don't believe that's true?
We believe we've presented those figures, but we'll be checking that.
That's the same with Mears. Absolutely, those figures have been presented.
You don't rely on the National Audit Office?
Not in that regard.
Okay. Why is there such a differential in terms of the profit margins across each of the regions and the different contracts? Just explain to the committee and to the country who's listening why there is such a different set of profits across a number of areas, which also change over time.
I guess I can talk to our two contracts, which is Wales and the south of England. And it is just market forces. So the property market in Wales is very different to the property market in the south of England from both cost and availability perspective. So it is predominantly the property cost that drives those variations. And of course, there's the hotel element. Much more hotels in the south, hardly any in Wales. So that has a big impact on those contracts at the moment for us. And my understanding is there is a differential profit margin that would have been negotiated as part of the bidding process back in 2019. So that's probably why they're all different.
Okay. Would you agree with that?
Well, I think from our perspective, it's probably easier to use an analogy. So Northern Ireland, according to the NAO report, is one of the most profitable regions, and I think it's important to understand in that context that it is a small region. As I said before, the profit margin mentioned in the report is before the profit share has been taken into account. So actually that margin is probably nearer 10%. However, the big driver in Northern Ireland is we're dealing with one authority across the whole board. So that means that our sort of collaborative working is very much more effective and efficient. We are able to procure dispersed accommodation easier, we get less resistance, and basically the whole machine moves a lot smoother. If you contrast that, say, to Scotland, which is our most challenging region, you've heard, I think, from other witnesses who've attended previous sessions about the challenges that we've had in Glasgow. But an additional factor to bear in mind there is the property licensing laws are different. So, for example, it is not possible to procure property in advance and then turn it into an HMO to enable it to be used to its full capacity. In Scotland, you have to procure the property with a licence pre-existing. That is a challenge because you're dealing with multiple authorities who have different views. So there are additional factors that play into the profitability, and a lot of it is linked to how smoothly the parties, the various stakeholders who are all involved in this, can engage and can actually drive it forward.
Right, okay.
So we have two regions, the Northwest and Midlands and the East of England, and we have a higher number of service users in Midlands and East of England, but there's a concentration in the Midlands part of that, not least because the East of England has higher property values and also some of the issues associated with rurality, where it's more difficult for service users to get access to local authority services, such as GPs or schools and so on. So there's a greater concentration of asylum accommodation in areas of greater population, which probably isn't surprising. So we have a higher level of income deriving from the Midlands than we do from the East of England aspect of that region, but also it's higher than from the Northwest, which is running at about, I think, at about 80% of the size of the Midlands, East of England area.
Okay. Isn't it the reality that you go into areas which are, on the whole, cheaper areas, and in those areas you go at the bottom end of the market to maximise your profit? And why wouldn't you do that as companies who are incentivised by your shareholders to make a profit? There's nothing illegal about making profit in this country. Would you like to just be transparent and challenge the assumption that there's anything wrong in making profit in that way?
I would want to say that we are really committed to providing safe accommodation that is appropriate. And I suppose if I were to characterise it, I'd characterise it as broadly the equivalent of social housing. Now, the Home Office specify in some detail the type of accommodation that they want us to provide, and they set really sort of stringent standards for how that should be presented, what facilities should be available, what square footage there should be, and so on. So there is no falling below the threshold that the Home Office set, and they carry out inspections, as we do, to make sure that all of the accommodation that's provided is both safe and appropriate and fit for purpose.
Yeah, but you're making you're making a profit, and that's fine.
Yes.
Are you choosing areas based upon maximising profit?
So we're choosing areas based on availability of accommodation within the rental sort of envelope that we have.
Right, okay.
So it's not about it's not about maximising profit. It's about maximising availability.
We've got some more questions in
yeah,
this
of course.
area.
Can I just ask one more question?
Yeah, and then I'm going to bring Chris in, and then we'll
yes, apologies, Chair. Just in terms of the safeguarding element, do you have a key performance indicator from the Home Office which judges you positively or negatively on how well you safeguard your tenants?
So the Home Office contract requires us to support safeguarding, but there isn't a KPI attached to it.
Is that the same across all three? Yes. Okay.
We've got some more questions on safeguarding later, but Chris, Murray, and then I'm going to give them to
very briefly from me while we're on profits. So, Mr. Lakey from Clearsprings, your founder recently entered the Sunday Times rich list because the profits from his fortune have increased by 35%, which is kind of an analogous number to the increase we've seen on the asylum contracts. Are those two facts related?
I can't really talk to kind of the wealth of Graham King, the chairman, and where he might make investments. But as I said before, what's important to note from our perspective is that the money is in the group bank account ready to be invested back in. So if you look at the profits we made over the last 5 years, which is about 300 and odd million altogether over that 5-year period, again, the majority of that is still ready to invest back in.
Ready to invest, but do you actually reinvest it? Has
some
that
of
happened so far?
Some of it has been reinvested already, and some of it's ready to go. I don't have those figures.
You don't know,
with me.
right? Okay. Now, one final point is the money that the Home Office gives to your organisations is actually qualifies as overseas development assistance. It's money the British taxpayer has given to send to the poorest people in the world. Do you think it causes any ethical dilemmas for you for that money to be going to your profits?
I think, answering from my perspective, obviously it's not for me or Mears to comment on where the funding comes from. I understand from...
You can just say no. That's all right.
I understand from previous hearings that the money has to come from that, and as a result of that, that's in accordance with the requirements and the law.
No, thanks.
Thank you. We've got a guest here today from the Housing, Communities and Local Government Committee, Will Forster.
Thank you, Chairman. I want to explore a little bit more about the locations of where accommodation is provided. Why are there still such high concentrations of accommodations in particular areas, whether that be in some local authorities but not others next door, and in some regions but not others? What incentives or what penalties do you as companies have to ensure there is a fair distribution of accommodation across the country?
I can answer that. In terms of sort of incentives or penalties, we haven't got any contractual penalties for the wider distribution. Obviously, as has been said by Claudia, Home Office is a very, very important client, and we want to assist them in every way we can. And as a result of their desire to acquire dispersed accommodation in a wider range and a wider region, we have done what we can to achieve that. And I think the NAO report acknowledges that more local authorities are engaging. The issue, I think, to some extent, in terms of sort of location of current accommodation is partly due to the fact that, Claudia said, primary driver, the availability of such accommodation. But in addition to that, it's the other services that may be in the area that can provide support to the service users. So that plays a significant part as well. And obviously in cities and larger towns, that support network is more substantial than in sort of more rural areas.
The Home Office and local authorities between them agree a service user dispersal plan which is reviewed regularly, which takes into account local economic factors and social factors, and I'm sure political factors, and comes up with a determination about levels of asylum seeker accommodation that is appropriate in each locality, and then our role is then to procure the accommodation according to that dispersal plan, and when we have reached sort of the cap that dispersal plan imposes, we have to stop sourcing accommodation in those locations.
That dispersal plan, is there any financial incentives to meet it or to go beyond that area? I think that's the concern that we as MPs are feeling, that yourself and the Home Office choose some locations, not others, and there isn't a fair distribution. Were you surprised when the contracts were originally agreed? The Home Office never asked for, was never going to punish you for not spreading out the asylum accommodation?
I wasn't involved in this sector at all when the contracts were new, so my corporate memory, I'm afraid, doesn't go back to that. But we don't design those dispersal plans. We are recipients of the plans. And so there isn't a question of whether there's an incentive to meet them or not. They are a cap, and we can't go above the cap.
Okay. Well, obviously, following on from, and particularly my colleague from Wimbledon, highlighting that actually yourselves as companies using hotels has an incentive so that you could have more profit. From what you've been saying is that actually the dispersal plan is set by the Home Office. So the Home Office are choosing the locations, they're choosing the type of accommodation. Is that your view?
Home Office in conjunction with local authorities, not the Home Office unilaterally.
Okay, thank you. And final question, if I may. On local authorities, which I'm pleased you mentioned, how do you respond to local authorities who are expressing concern about the procurement of asylum accommodation in their area with what they feel is not sufficient consultation, but also that it then pushes up the cost of housing that they have to afford, or their wider residents, their wider community has to afford? What impact assessments do you do when you go into an area?
So in effect, the impact assessment is the service user dispersal plan. If I were asked what would be my response to local authorities or local elected groups for particular localities, I think I would say I understand that this is a motive issue and I understand it's politically hotly contested. Our role isn't to set the policy, it isn't to set the legal framework, it isn't to be answerable to an electorate, it's to deliver a contract which the elected government of the day has taken out with us, and to deliver that to the best of our ability, and that's what we focus on.
No, I would totally agree with everything Claudia said there in terms of how we operate. We try to fulfil the requirements put on us in accordance with the plan. But ultimately, it's Home Office decision as to where the properties are procured, and obviously the communication between local authorities and Home Office take place. We facilitate as much communication as we can, but at the end of the day, we are driven by the expectations placed on us.
Thank you. Jenny Reid.
Right, thank you, Chair. I just want to go back to something that you referred, Mr. Burt, to a couple of times, and that was the losses by providing your services in Scotland. Surely, as a business, you will be looking to kind of mitigate that risk going forward. How do you plan? What do you have at your disposal to address that issue? And would you be looking at the renegotiation of the contracts to have fewer accommodation sites in Scotland?
No, I think in the grander, the grand scheme of things, we have to ensure that we have appropriate levels of accommodation, dispersed accommodation available. That will be a challenge in Scotland because of the rural nature, particularly.
You mentioned Glasgow in particular, though.
Glasgow, initially when the contract came into fruition, we could only route into Glasgow. Subsequently, that has now been expanded to a wider area, and COSLA, I think, are very much involved in that, but are trying to drive an equitable dispersal across the entire region, which in principle is a valid position to take. In practice, and actually delivering it creates challenges for us because, as I indicated, certain more rural areas do not necessarily have the support networks that some service users will require. It means that our own internal support teams are spread thinner because they have to travel further to see fewer people. That's part of the reason why sometimes you get a sort of accumulation, because it makes it easy for the logistical chain underneath everything to work and get to everybody. Obviously, wider dispersal is something that is on the agenda, and we will have to be agile and respond to that as best we can.
Okay. A bit more.
Thank you. And just following on to the same themes, when choosing a hotel location, availability was mentioned. What is your assessment of availability?
Sorry, is that directed at me? As I say, when we were required to start using hotels, availability meant having enough capacity in a specified region or area, which Home Office asked us to fulfil. We therefore made inquiries of the local regions to ascertain what properties were available. We then put forward packages, proposals to the Home Office on an open book basis, so they could see everything that was required in the standing up of the hotel, and the decision to utilise them or not was Home Office's. Obviously, there was a degree of communication in certain circumstances with local authorities and other stakeholders about the suitability of geographical location. For example, you wouldn't want a hotel located significantly close to a major road or something along those lines. You know, back in the day, we did have people offering us hotels that were on motorway service stations. Clearly unacceptable.
Okay. So everything you've mentioned there relates to capacity of the accommodation itself, and you've mentioned about hotels not being next to roads or highways, etc. But nothing that you've mentioned relates to the impact on local services, i.e. GPs, schools, transport connectivity, all of which is having a direct impact. What assessment, when you're choosing a hotel location, are you having in terms of the wider impact of capacity on service provision?
Well, I don't think that, with respect, falls to Mears. That is a matter for the Home Office to determine in conjunction with the local authority and other stakeholders in the region. Once we are required to procure property in a certain region, we do the very best we can to find the best suitable property.
Do you as a provider, take into account the impact of capacity on other services beyond the accommodation itself when putting forward a recommendation to the Home Office?
Specifically, no, that is not part of our...
What level of interaction do you have with local authorities as part of that recommendation to the Home Office?
Well, we engage with the local authorities and give them information about Home Office's intentions. They have an opportunity to raise objections. If they object, then it's a matter for them and the Home Office to determine whether or not that objection will be upheld.
Okay, so just to summarise, there's no actual observation or assessment criteria that's done in terms of capacity and impact on additional services beyond the actual accommodation itself when assessing a criteria for a hotel accommodation?
Not specifically by Mears, but again, I stress the fact that it is not for Mears to do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Belle Riviere-Addy.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to clarify that when you're given this task by the Home Office, it is to provide accommodation and they allow you to use hotels for said accommodation. They're not directing you to use hotels for said accommodation.
They are directing us to provide accommodation for large numbers of people, and we work within regional caps for how much dispersed accommodation we're allowed to use, and where we are not able to accommodate people in the dispersed accommodation because of those caps, the point at which we fall back on contingency, which is hotel accommodation.
Okay, and you talked a lot about value for money and longevity. Now, I know not all of you are necessarily involved in property development of any type. I know Clearsprings not necessarily, and perhaps Serco only offer advisory services in relation to real estate development, but I know Mears does engage in property development. Has there never been a discussion in actual building? The amount of money that you've received over the past couple of years for your particular contracts to provide said accommodation, has there never been a discussion from your perspective to the Home Office to suggest that perhaps it may be better value for money, as you're saying that you provide, to actually build housing?
As a point of clarity, we don't develop properties. In historic terms, we have done some development. We are not in development now and haven't been for some considerable period of time. We do, on occasions, work with other local authorities in joint venture products where we assist them in the construction of certain premises, for example, care facilities. But we don't build homes. What I can tell you that we have done is purchase properties on our balance sheet. It's not our ideal method of operation, but we have done that, and I think we've purchased over 400 properties, creating over 1,700 bed spaces to try and assist and show Home Office our intent to assist them with that. So I do believe that we, go above and beyond the contractual expectations in trying to help Home Office solve that problem. But in terms of building, it may ultimately be a solution for someone, but it's not something that Mears could assist with.
You're absolutely right that Serco doesn't have a property portfolio that we own. I think we would see an opportunity perhaps for greater long-term planning around the type of accommodation that should be provided, and if we do see reducing volumes of service users that create enough sort of headroom for the Home Office to be able to pick and choose what type of accommodation they would use, then a long-term plan that would then make it possible to, for example, invest in medium-sized sites, I think would perhaps offer the best combination of sort of community impact being limited and value for money being maximised, to be able to have a network of medium-sized sites sort of across the country. At the moment, I think it's probably fair to say the whole system is responding to sort of to really acute pressure on numbers, and that means that drives more short-term thinking in terms of the type of property that gets used.
Okay. It's more because I suppose this has been, whilst responding to an emergency, let's say, over a certain number of years with many millions of pounds. I suppose the question is, has your assessment been that actually providing housing, or actually building or looking into some sort of development would ultimately help you provide real value for money instead of using hotels?
Well, I can definitely answer that, Pete, and absolutely we've made lots and lots and lots of recommendations. I think there is a misunderstanding that contingency accommodation is a hotel or has to be a hotel, and it really doesn't at all. It just needs to be safe and secure accommodation, in our view, ideally self-catering rather than catered, because it just gives people a better chance to cook and cater for themselves and give them more control. So yes, definitely we would be happy and delighted to look at anything that helps to reduce that dependency and bring more DA into the market.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So can I just go back to the points you made, and particularly this is for you, Mr. about procuring accommodation. So what could the Home Office do to make it easier for you to procure accommodation in somewhere like the east of England?
The fundamental block that we have is always the service user dispersal plan, and the caps that they create. Other blocks that we have are often around the cost of rental accommodation and the availability of services within communities, bearing in mind that our service users are destitute. They don't have access to public transport even very easily, and so it's very important that they are in places where there is, at least reasonable provision of services, and preferably also a supportive community. In terms of blocks, I think we would be really happy to see more learning taken from other jurisdictions where asylum accommodation is provided in other countries. There are some very good models which seem to be less politically contested than we have in the UK, such as Germany, Switzerland, Austria, for example, which have highly devolved government structures, and you have very responsive to local needs and sort of community preferences, because they are highly devolved governments. But you have, for example, accommodation that is provided by the local authority that is then operated by the private sector. Some of those models work very well. Models that have community-based integration at their heart, so that they recognise that a majority of people will receive leave to remain in that country, and they look to bring forward the social, cultural, economic integration into that society, so that so that refugees become integrated really well, not just quickly, into the community that they're going to be living in.
Only read.
So in more detail then, how does the contracts differ? What are the fundamental differences between the contracts that you have with government in the UK as opposed to Germany, Austria, Switzerland? And is there a difference in not just the accommodation, but do you do more to support the population within that accommodation and access to support services, or are they both still just accommodation contracts?
So, because we don't deal with federal governments, we generally deal with local governments. So that might be a city council, it might be a regional council, it might be a Swiss canton. So they all vary. So there isn't a single model. They are responsive to what those local governments want to provide. And across a country the size of Germany, which is politically very varied, there will be different levels of provision required. But generally speaking, the model that we operate in a country like Switzerland, for example, would be they would have all under one roof. They'd have walk-in asylum reporting within a single piece of real estate. They'd have reporting, they'd have triaging, they'd have casework, they'd have health provision, they'd have education for children, they'd have asylum seeker accommodation, they'd have provision for sort of social integration, preparation for work, and so on. And what we would provide would vary from site to site, but we certainly provide integration support, the facility management of the accommodation, security for the accommodation, and the government would be doing the caseworking element alongside us.
So are you contracted in any countries to actually provide and deliver support services?
Yes.
So can you go into a wee bit more detail about those? So you mentioned integration support.
Yes. So helping asylum seekers become ready for employment, for example, helping with language, helping with a kind of cultural integration, sort of to help new arrivals understand the type of expectations that their, hopefully their adopted country will have of them, and doing things like running volunteering in the community, running schools for children.
Thank you. Can I just ask, why is the service user dispersal plan, why is it a block?
It's a block insofar as it creates a cap.
Just talk me through that, sorry.
So it sets out the number of asylum seekers per capita of the local population that is going to be permissible, that's acceptable to the Home Office in consultation with the local authority. So if, for example, we said no more than, or it wouldn't be we, it would be the plan. If the plan said no more than one asylum seeker per 200 head of population in an area, if we get to the point where we have 1 in 200, we can't source further properties in that area, even if the rental market would allow it, even if local authority services would support it. We can't go beyond it.
And you talked then about the model in Switzerland, and I will bring others in. I'm just curious about the answers you've given. You talk about Switzerland and Germany and their devolved, the nature of their local government. I mean, we don't have that local government structure in the same way. We don't have that level of devolution. There are already 70 local authorities, I think, that don't have any accommodation in them at the moment. I mean, how do you break that down? Why do they not have asylum accommodation? Is it powers that the local authority has used to stop this, or is there some other reason?
I'd have to refer you to MHCLG and the Home Office, I'm afraid. I mean, they are devising those plans. We're just the recipients of the plans.
Do either of you have any insight on that?
I guess all I could probably add to that is if we take the south is a fairly obvious one, because we've got London kind of smack bang in the middle of it, particularly in the southeast, of course. So you have that massive disparity in housing cost and housing availability from London, a relatively well-populated, large property market, albeit very, very expensive and difficult to find housing in right now, which is why local authorities are also struggling. But then you've got, for us, the very different rural southwest and kind of rural southeast model, where you've got a large land mass, but not huge conurbations, so the towns are much smaller. And really, in terms of the rental market, we are talking about properties in the private rented sector. They only come on the market when people move. If there's no movement, then there's no property and property availability. So it really comes down to availability, sometimes affordability. For us, not so much. You can see we're most of our asylum seekers in the south are in London, the most expensive property market. It is really more about those properties becoming available, the local authority accepting the placement of that property and that property type, landlords wanting to rent out properties, and that's been quite challenging, particularly with HMOs over the last kind of 12, 18 months. So all of those factors together really produce our ability to get dispersed accommodation or not in a particular area. But it really is an accommodation contract, so it's about, are those houses, is that accommodation actually available in the first place?
I think just the only point I would add to that is, picking up on Claudia's point regarding the cap, the other thing that needs to be factored in is that in certain locations where we are already in excess of the cap through historic placement, that needs to be equalised. So sometimes you'll need to be moving people out of an area into new areas where notionally there appears to be new capacity, but actually all you're doing is shifting the existing capacity round slightly. So that is something that needs to be considered as well in the wider plan.
Moving on to the medium-sized sites, I think Serco has proposed sites. I'm not sure whether Clearsprings and Mears have, but could you just talk through, first of all, what do you mean by a medium-sized site? What is it, and what has been the Home Office's reaction to your proposals?
So our medium-sized sites are typically repurposed student halls of residence, that sort of thing.
Repurposed office blocks?
I'm sorry?
Repurposed office blocks?
Well, we do in other in other jurisdictions.
We haven't done it here.
I'm not sure, but that would be the sort of thing that we could do. We've got about, I think, 5 medium-sized sites. We would be very happy to have more. They do have to go through local planning, processes, and that can be quite difficult. So we've acquired sites that have not gone through planning successfully, that we've had to then cease progressing. The type of accommodation that you then have is sort of small sort of flatlets. So individuals who are generally self-catering, so that brings the cost down. They're not so large that they, cause, the same levels of anxiety that some of the large sites that were planned have clearly caused.
So is it sort of like student halls of residence? There'd be so many people in a flat type area with a shared kitchen and separate. Yes. They'd have an ensuite bathroom each and that kind of thing. Okay, and it's the same for.
Yeah, so we've put forward some sort of outline proposals in the past. None of them have gone forward for various reasons, but I think picking up on Claudia's point, the area of sometimes changing the nature of a property is more complicated than at first sight. There are planning issues. Fire safety is a significant issue that needs to be factored in, and many offices, especially the older blocks, haven't got the required standard for fire safety, so they would need substantial investment in terms of remedial and to bring them up to the standards. Depending upon the nature of those properties as well, if they're higher risk or they want to be transitioned into higher risk, you have to go through the regulator, which adds that layer of slight delay on it. So it's a really good idea. It's quite difficult and challenging to actually deliver in the current environment that we operate in.
For us, we've got about 2,000 bed spaces in medium-sized sites right now. By that you mean like student accommodation? That kind of thing? Not so much student accommodation, but great for singles. Ours is more kind of small blocks of flats or small serviced apartments, those kind of things.
But they've been built as blocks of flats in the first place?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah, and then we've just been able to rent those. So, we strongly believe that that's the best and fastest route out of hotels is to look at the medium size. And again, self-catering, I know I keep stressing it, but it's so important, that kind of self-catering, serviced apartments, small blocks of flats, possibly permitted developments, but they bring their own challenges. And for singles, and that's probably one of the biggest changes that we've seen over the period of the contract, we're now talking about 70% singles as opposed to kind of 40% previously. So a complete shift in the housing requirement, because we're then again talking about HMOs as opposed to family accommodation, which is a different and more challenging prospect in the property world.
Just so we've got it for the record, what sort of numbers would you expect in the medium-sized sites?
So we'd probably be looking for, in terms of people, anywhere between 20 and 100 would be the kind of the maximum.
Smaller than hotels?
Yeah.
Is that the same across the board?
We've got 750 people across 5 sites.
Right, okay.
Yeah, similar.
And how much are you working with the Home Office on their new strategy to help to move them in the direction that you think would be appropriate?
We're involved in those conversations on a regular basis, as well as joint provider workshops and the plans for the dispersal plans.
Thank you. Nicola.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Lakey, I'd like to look at Stay Belvedere Hotels. The Home Office refused permission for you to use Stay Belvedere Hotels as a subcontractor. So significant elements of their behaviour were failures and significant elements of their behaviour. Why didn't you notice?
So we're still waiting for the full details from the Home Office in terms of their concerns, and certainly we work with all of our subcontractors, including Stay Belvedere, with any challenges or concerns that we would have around the performance.
About Stay
No,
Belvedere?
we have concerns on a regular basis with all of our provider in terms of where they don't meet any requirements, then we will raise that with them and work.
We're not aware of Stay Belvedere being worse than the others?
I don't have that comparison in comparative to the other providers, but we would have been working with Stay Belvedere on any issues or concerns they may have had.
How good at Clearsprings? How good are you as a company at dealing with management information?
I think we're good. I think we do what's required of us, but I think we have been in some very challenging and difficult times. We've gone, as we've discussed, from 700 people in initial accommodation to, at its peak in 2024, 32,000, which is a big leap across numerous sites. So I think there have been lots and lots of challenges, but I think we're
good.
okay.
Do you know about KPI 9?
Yes.
And what can you tell the committee what KPI 9 is about?
So KPI 9 is about the provision of 2 specific pieces of management information, and only 2 specific pieces of management information.
What's the requirement each month?
Is that those pieces of information have to be submitted on time.
Have you ever fallen foul of it?
Yes, we have.
You haven't? You've never fallen foul of it, according to our figures?
In terms of, we're allowed 2 failures.
Yeah.
And
that's the point.
Yes.
You're only penalised if you have 3 failures.
Yes.
You are the worst provider of management information, but you only do 1 or 2 failures a month. You play that system very well. Why don't you employ a few more information officers? Do you know what the profits per person in Clearsprings have gone up from 2020 to 20?
I don't have that information in front of me.
Well, let me tell you. Your profits per employee has gone up from £6,000 per employee to £300,000 per employee. Mm-hmm. Amazing productivity. But maybe you should employ a few more people to get the job done properly.
Thank you. We'll take that comment away. I don't really know how I can
I'd like to hear
that.
what you think.
We're constantly recruiting. We've gone from just under 100 people to well over 500. And certainly that area and a number of other areas are under constant review, and we're always looking to improve.
How come you constantly fail to provide management information to the Home Office?
In a timely manner. So it was about the timing, not
timely manner is part of.
It's not about the data and the information itself, it's about when it was provided.
Well, why don't you provide it in time?
Well, we do try, and we're working on our systems. But as I said,
employ some more people.
And we are recruiting all the time, and that's certainly one of the areas that we will look to recruit into.
Thank you. Ben Maguire.
Thanks, Chair. I just wanted to go back to a question a moment ago that Paul was asking of you, Steve. I was quite concerned to hear your answer there that the Stay Belvedere hotels, in your view, or company's view, was potentially just as bad as any of the others, because the Home Office actually removed permission for you to use Stay Belvedere hotels as a subcontractor because significant elements of their behaviour and performance fell short of what the government would expect. So I really wanted to pick up on that point, and I was just quite concerned that you, as a business, hadn't spotted that yourself, and that you needed the Home Office actually to step in here and remove permission. Do you mind just explaining that point in a bit more detail?
If I can, I will, but I'm not sure I can add very much more. It's a very live subject at the moment, as you can imagine, and we are in conversations with both Stay Belvedere and the Home Office. I'm not sure I can shed, at this stage, very much more light on that. I'm sorry.
You're absolutely clear. You're not aware of Stay Belvedere requiring that sanction. Is that your view? Your view is you're not aware of any defects in what they are providing, which is worse than your other subcontractors. No, is that your position?
That's not my position.
What is your position?
My position is we are right in the middle of that live situation at the moment. We're in conversations with the Home Office and with SBHL. We're following the instruction that we've been given, but I don't have any more detail or data that I can give you here.
That's not a position. That's just waffle. With respect.
That's our position. I
so you're not going to
have the information available to be able to give you a more defined answer than that, I'm afraid.
You finish, Ben.
Yeah, I think just slightly change your answer from earlier where you said it didn't appear to be any different to the other providers, but now you're saying you can't comment on the live situation, is that right?
I think that would be a more accurate reflection, yes.
Right, okay.
Robbie Moore.
Thank you. I want to just focus on performance management. So the question applies to all of you. The contracts allow you and the Home Office to set different performance targets for hotel accommodation. To what extent have you done that and negotiated that with the Home Office? Maybe if we start with yourself.
I believe we have the same performance regime across the board.
So same performance regime in relation to performance targets across all hotel accommodation?
Yes. The difference is because when we use hotels, we are in effect contracting the management of the hotel to continue running it. We then pass on the performance requirement to our subcontractor who's running the hotel. But we, in the same way that I guess a good leader would say that you can delegate authority but you can't delegate responsibility, we retain responsibility, but we also hold the hotel management company to account for the same KPIs that we're held to account for.
Okay, so the same question applies to the two of you. Maybe Mr. Lakey, if you want.
That would be exactly the same answer, so okay. Yes, applied across the board.
And to yourself?
Yes, and properties are inspected and subject to Home Office scrutiny and local authority scrutiny as per usual.
Okay, so to very quickly summarise, all three providers not changing their performance targets for any type of hotel provision, and that obviously relates to contingency hotels as well. Okay, so in terms of improving cost effectiveness with the performance targets that doesn't vary across any of the hotel accommodation you provide, do you feel in terms of if contracts were to be renegotiated further down the line, there is any cost effectiveness that can be achieved through the contract provision through changes that could be achieved through changing performance targets?
I think rather than changing performance targets, the real cost driver for hotels are the standards that are specified. The Home Office has gone through a process over the last couple of years of looking at how they can address the cost of hotels by increasing capacity, for example, or increasing occupancy rates. They will look at the type of menu that's on offer. They'll look at all the things that make a hotel operate as a business and sort of seek to sort of drive down the cost of what that should look like. But I think it's also fair to say that there's a quality floor under which neither we nor the Home Office would want to go. So for us, for example, we have not been open to holding more than 2 bed spaces per hotel room, for example. We could have brought the cost down if we'd been willing to put a 3rd bed in, but we felt that was neither safe nor decent, so chose not to do that. But there are ways that you can engineer cost, but you have to at the same time be willing to engineer quality.
And the same is just in terms of increasing the cost efficiency to the taxpayer.
I think for us the main drive again is just to come up with a different provision. We just don't think that the hotel, yes, the cost can be brought down, and again it's about how you use the space. But if you get into a medium-sized self-catered model, it is at least a third cheaper than a hotel generally. So that's our main thrust really, is to come away from the hotel model wherever we can and get as close to a dispersed model as possible.
Under the current hotel arrangement, would you accept there's a variation in terms of the standard of provision that is rolled out to those that are using the service from one hotel to another? From the visits that we've been doing, for example, there's a great deal of variation in terms of the community space or size of the community space that exists, right the way down to whether gym facilities are open or not. I mean, there seems to be a great variation. Why is there not just a standard that's applied across the board?
I think it's probably because of the temporary nature of the hotels. They were always designed from the very beginning to be a short-term emergency provision and never really foreseen as a long-term.
Why has that not been audited as we've been going along and changed and adapted to reduce the cost of the taxpayer?
So there's been lots and lots of negotiation and reduction. We are currently about just under 50% less per person per night now than we were when we first started using the hotels. So there's been lots and lots of work to reduce the per person per night rate and the overall cost by some margin. But I think you reach a point where it's not possible to drive that any further other than over-occupying or putting more people into rooms. So then it becomes about just trying to find a different solution that isn't necessarily a catered hotel.
Is there anything else to add from the two of you on that point that you want to expand on or that differs to your view? No. And just, okay, in terms of the contract that exists at the moment, is there anything within that that incentivises you as a provider to go above and beyond in terms of the offering to those residents?
In terms of the contract, there are elements within the contract that would require us to develop processes and protocols for individuals that are living there. But I think actually from a practical perspective of somebody being in that environment for not kind of 20, 30 days, but in some cases 20, 30 months, that drives the need to develop exactly that, which is why in a lot of the hotels you will see various different social classes, art classes, music classes, trips into the community. If it's a more rural site like Wethersfield, for example, then there'll be a regular twice-a-day minibus service. And all of those things, none of those things are in the contract, but all of them have grown up over the period of using it because of the necessity of having people in that location for such a long period of time. It drives the need to add the additional element.
Okay, so just using that example of Wethersfield, for example. So there is regular transport that is put on from Wethersfield into the neighbouring towns. You're saying that that's not actually included within the contract that was awarded?
From a Wethersfield perspective, it is, in fairness, but in some of the hotels, which are slightly different, then no, it wouldn't be. That's something, those kind of things, the imam service that we've got in a lot of the hotels.
These services that are provided by you as the provider or other charitable services?
Both. So some of them are provided by us and our subcontractors, some of them are provided by voluntary sector organisations. It's a mix.
Thank you. Well, Belle Ribiera-Addy.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I want to ask some further questions about performance. Why have there been periods in recent years where you've consistently missed your targets for accommodating people in dispersal accommodation, and that's specifically Clearsprings and Serco?
So we deliver consistently at least 99% compliance with our contract. I think our contract performance is very, very good. There was a period which you may be highlighting in sort of around about 21, 22, where we had some missed targets, and I think a lot of that was, and again, this was before I was part of the company, so I'm trying to draw on sort of the wider corporate memory, but my understanding is that there were a lot of change the demographic, which meant that we had to have significant amounts of our accommodation out of use while we sort of changed where different service users were going to be located, and that hit us in terms of KPI performance. But apart from that, our performance is, I think, outstandingly good. Now, where we do miss on KPIs, it's almost always around maintenance and timeliness. So, for example, and that might be something as minor as changing a light bulb within a certain period of time, and usually if we miss it by a matter of minutes. We've got extremely stringent contractual obligations around repairs and maintenance, for example. And as you'll know from the KPI schedule, we have to provide accommodation that is both safe and decent and fit for purpose. And there are very tight time sort of scales applied to each of those. So, for example, I think there was an example in December last year where we failed to have a secure front door for a period of time, number of hours that cost us £70,000. What you see with our performance regime is a small number of very stringent KPIs. So it's designed to drive a very rapid response to maintenance requirements. And if you're slow, you get penalised very heavily. And of course, if you are working, we're a very governance-heavy company. We employ a lot of people on this contract, and a lot of those people are in maintenance roles. A lot of them are in data management, in business intelligence, in analytics, and so on, so that we are able to identify rapidly when there's a need to get a maintenance job done and get somebody there to do that job very, very quickly. Because if you don't, then that's what's penalised. That's what's penalised heavily.
So you missed them because you're not maintaining things quick enough. Is that the answer?
So the answer is that where we have missed targets, it's almost always a marginal miss on timing.
So they're not serious. That's what you're saying, essentially.
They're serious because they're heavily weighted. Mm-hmm. But so, as an example, this is a hypothetical example. Mm-hmm. We provide fully furnished accommodation. That would include, let's say, in the kitchen, a microwave. If that microwave is broken, we would have to replace that within a matter of probably 24 hours. And we do that. If it's a bank holiday and we get it replaced within 25 hours, that's a KPI loss and we'll be heavily penalised for that. I don't think that's particularly poor performance, but it's contractual, so it's levied against us, and that's right and proper.
Okay, and the same to yourself?
Same. We had a particular issue with our complaints process. We introduced a new system, and that threw an extra couple of hours into the response time for complaints. So there's a series of for a couple of months where we were getting that back into line, but again, it was around the timings. And then the challenge around getting sufficient accommodation and the challenges there is just about availability of dispersed accommodation and is there enough of it and can we get it? In London, for example, it's really challenging. In some of the rural areas, it can be challenging for different reasons, but it is about availability.
So whilst we're on your complaints, I wanted to find out what your response was to analysis that suggests there's a significantly higher mortality and complaint rate within Clearsprings accommodation compared to other providers, and what action you may have taken to resolve this.
Well, I don't think there's a higher rate. I think we have a much, much bigger volume than anybody else, so there may be a larger number of cases. We've enhanced our safeguarding team. We work very closely with the Home Office Safeguarding Hub, and we've done an awful lot of work around education, training and new processes to try and enhance the safeguarding aspect to the service.
Thank you. And I want to ask all of you about how the KPIs around dispersal are working in practice, given that there are such large numbers of people moved to dispersal accommodation but remain in contingency accommodation.
Yeah, in terms of the process of moving service users, I think one area that does need to be considered and factored in is failure to travel. So often we can have situations where service users are earmarked to be moved out of contingency accommodation into dispersed accommodation, and they refuse to travel. So on the notified day of travel, they don't transfer because they want to stay where they are or whatever. For our contracts across the range, generally speaking, we're looking at a failure to travel range of about 40 to 60% at all times, which is quite substantial because it does create a log jam in the machine. So if people refuse to move out where they are and go to where they're supposed to go, it has a double impact. One, it prevents the space that they are in now being utilised to keep the flow moving. But equally, it means that there's then capacity, bed spaces, which are notionally available, not being used. And that is a challenge, I think, and it is something perhaps in the future considerations of how to crack that. That would be a significant step forward, and certainly from our experience in our regions, in Northern Ireland, where we are dealing with a more focused single authority, so we have this sort of higher intensity of sort of relationship and partnership working, our refusal to travel rates are much lower. So that's something to possibly think about.
Thank you. And the same to all of you, actually, in terms of how do the KPIs around dispersals work in practice because of the large numbers that are not moved to dispersal accommodation, they stay in contingency accommodation.
And if I could just say, in the interest of time, perhaps if you could just, the additional things that haven't been already said.
I don't think I've got very much to add to that. I'm not particularly aware that failure to travel is a huge issue for us. Okay. I think what that does do is illustrate the kind of the human desire. If you're in a place where you feel settled and safe, you don't want to leave it. But if you can get people to a location where they feel settled and safe, and then don't ask them to move, that's probably the best way to sort of to get both stable populations and sort of maximise sort of efficient use of the accommodation.
And do any of you have any instances where people are remaining in your properties even though they are potentially meant to be moved on, saying being moved from a section 98 to a section 95?
It happens quite a lot, particularly at decision time. So lots of negative overstays. So someone will receive a negative decision but not move on. But also people will receive a positive decision and there won't be any local authority accommodation for them ready, so they will stay.
But you continue to be paid for that, even though you shouldn't?
No, we don't get paid for them at that point. At that point, if they overstay, then we don't get paid for that bed space. We just have to deal with the challenge of moving them on to local authority accommodation.
And just one more question about some issues with Serco. Have there been any contract breaches or formal warnings that you've had in the past 5 years, and what were the outcomes of them?
I'm not aware of any, but I think it's only right that I'd say I'll take that away and ensure that I haven't sort of misdirected you and write to you on that. I'm not aware of any, but I haven't been with this company for very long, so it's possible that there's something that I'm not aware of.
Thank you.
Okay, so I've got Paul Kohler, then I've got Margaret Mullane, then Chris Murray.
Thank you. I'd like to go back to these onerous KPIs. It's a self-reporting system, isn't it? You mark your own homework. Do you think that's particularly onerous?
Well, I didn't use that word. I think I said stringent.
Okay.
I think
stringent.
I think stringent is appropriate because we're being paid a lot of money to deliver this service. And I think it's right and proper that the Home Office hold us to account.
They're not. You're holding yourself to account.
Well, they do hold us to account also.
Well, according to the Chief Inspector, the Home Office has no capacity to do so, and your systems aren't robust. So how exactly are these KPIs robust?
I think our systems are robust.
So you're disagreeing with what the... Did you respond to the Chief Inspector when he said that?
For example...
Did you respond to the Chief Inspector when he said that in his report?
I'm not sure. But, for example, during April, we carried out 17,000 property inspections of our portfolio. Over a 12-month period, the Home Office themselves will carry out thousands of inspections of our property portfolio. So I think it would be wrong to say that we're not held up to scrutiny, and I think it would be wrong to say that the Home Office is not a well-informed customer.
Would you apply that process to your subcontractors? Would you allow them to tell you how well they're doing quality assurance? Is that a system you would use in business? Well,
I mean, interestingly, we rely very little on subcontractors.
In any part of your business, would you rely on the person or the company providing a service to tell you how well they're doing it, or would you make your own judgment?
Of course, we operate sort of due diligence and we operate governance to make sure that where we do use subcontractors, they're delivering the service
Do you think self-reporting or KPIs is a robust system?
Well, I think given that it's then backed by inspections, and also there are there are or would be significant issues attached to misreporting, as we know, that you
give yourselves a clean bill of health nearly all the time. You're constantly giving yourself a clean bill of health. We hear from inspectors, we hear many problems, but you rarely fall foul of your KPIs. All of you. It's not just your company.
Well, the Home Office inspect.
They don't have the resource. They've said so themselves, or the Chief Inspector said so.
Well, I can't speak for the Chief Inspector, but I know that the Home Office carried out thousands of inspections of our property in the past 12 months.
Yeah, I would echo what Claudia said. We do work in a very collaborative way. We are scrutinised significantly. There are a lot of Home Office independent inspections. They have access to our system, so they can go in and not necessarily rely on what we tell them. They can have a look at themselves. All of our repair and maintenance jobs are.
Why did the Chief Inspector say the Home Office's capacity to carry out assurance activity in hotels is extremely limited, and that providers' self-reports, which indicated extremely high performance against KPIs, were not robust? Was the Chief Inspector just making it up?
I can't speak for what the Chief Inspector had.
You disagree with that? You're saying he is wrong?
I would say our properties are scrutinised.
You're saying the Chief Inspector is wrong in that judgment?
I would say our properties are in good condition. They are heavily scrutinised, and Home Office has free range to analyse our data.
As I said to Mr. Sturt, is this approach you would take to companies working for you? Would you take this approach that you rely on their quality assurance to tell you how well they're doing? Would you do that as a business person?
In circumstances where we do utilise subcontractors, and in the asylum contract, we do to some extent, but not heavily. A vast majority of what we do is self-delivered. But we have the same requirement on them as we have from the Home Office. So they are required to report performance. We have access to their data to analyse it. They are required to report in the terms that we report. So that's GPS photographs, date stamped, time stamped. So we know exactly where their people are at any given time. So we have the means to actually audit and check. And
the information
check
you provide in reporting on your KPIs, do you give them date-stamped GPS stuff? You give that to the Home Office?
Yeah, absolutely.
Same for us. I guess I would say self-reporting only works as long as it's not self-audited. Self-reporting is absolutely fine if you're reporting your performance, providing that's then audited, and I get that that's a challenge in the hotel.
Do you think it's adequately audited?
I don't think it's a call for me to make. I think that's between the Chief Inspector and the Home Office. But from my perspective, what we would do is the subcontractors would report their performance, and then we would go out and verify to see if we agreed.
Is that what you've done with Stay Belvedere?
That it would be across all of our subcontractors. That would be the standard approach.
You've not discovered anything with Stay Belvedere?
As I said before, it's not something I could go into the detail of here.
Yeah, if I could just ask Jason, why do you think Mears has missed the most KPIs relating to accommodation being habitable and fit for purpose? Bearing in mind that this afternoon, clearly money's not the issue. I just wonder, what do you think the issues are?
I think, I'm going to sort of echo what Claudia said. The KPIs are stringent, and context is everything. In terms of a contractual failure, your contractual failure, you either comply or you don't, and that's as it should be. What I would say is that the customer experience data that we have, and it's not our data, it's Home Office data, is very positive. If you were to compare that, and I think an analogy has been raised before in what we do, we are a housing provider. So if we are compared to other housing providers, registered social housing or housing association, if you were to take our customer satisfaction surveys and compare them with some of the leading providers in that market, they would compare very, very favourably, and in certain circumstances exceed that.
So, bearing in mind, this is what's been said, that, you know, some of the accommodation isn't habitable and it's not fit for purpose. So who are you comparing yourself with when you're saying that?
Well, I'm not saying that we don't have problems. Obviously we do. The magnitude...
Why?
Because problems sometimes arise. You cannot always hit the numbers. And you know, where we do fail, what we look to do is to put the problem right, understand what happened, learn from it, and obviously support people impacted as a result. But I think an element of realism is required in that you cannot expect, and nobody can provide services 100% of the time that are always 100% right. Mistakes happen, problems arise. That's you know, it happens in all walks of life. The key is what you do about it and how often they are. And I would say in the context of what we do 15,000 inspections per month. We serve 5 million meals a year. Our customer experience response, the people who are actually using the service, is very, very positive. Where we get it wrong, we get it wrong, but I think it has to be put in context of the wider piece. Everyone that we get wrong, we get an awful lot right, is all I would say. But I don't excuse the fact that we get it wrong. Ideally, we strive to get it right.
I suppose my question to you, to follow on to that, is why Mears is missing the most KPIs? So, you know, yes, you know, councils, companies, that kind of things will make mistakes. Accommodation might not be habitable and fit for purpose, but it's very vulnerable people who, you know, are searching for a home, hoping to sort of have their asylum claim sorted. It's very stressful. And then adding to that, it's then the place is not habitable, not fit for purpose. I just want to understand why Mears? Why not the other companies?
It's something that I perhaps go away and look into if you want the granular detail.
I would, yeah.
What I can say, however, though, you know, in terms of satisfaction for accommodation, are you satisfied with your accommodation? We're running at North East Yorkshire Humber 91% for last year. For this year, so far we're at 93%, and that's Home Office data, not ours. That's not us surveying.
I suppose, I mean, Claudia made a point earlier that there's no light bulb and trying to turn that round or going to get a microwave. That's one thing. But to turn up to somewhere and it's not habitable and it's not fit for purpose, I think that's much more serious. And then, again, I'm back to the question again, why Mears?
No, I totally agree. But the context of what habitable means in the context of the contract needs to be considered in those circumstances. And in the grand scheme of things, our properties, I would say, are habitable. And that's reflected in our customer satisfaction survey. And it's reflected in the KPI performance.
Right. Okay. Chris Murray, we're not far from the end now, but Chris Murray.
Yeah, thanks very much, Chair. And I'm going to stay on the question of KPIs because it's been quite interesting to hear Ms. Sturt, you said the performance has been outstandingly good, but that just doesn't bear any parallel with the reports that are out there. You know, we hear about uninhabitable properties, 1 in 50 being deemed unsafe, suicide attempts, real safeguarding issues around modern slavery. And when you say that local customer experience is very good, your main customer is the Home Office, and there is nobody in the world who would argue that this has been a good experience from the Home Office, given the vast increases in costs. And you would have to be living under a rock to think that this hasn't been having big impacts on local communities around the country. So my question about the KPIs is, how often are you penalised for failing to meet your KPIs? What percentage of the time?
The first thing I would say is that what you're describing is...
Sorry, we don't have much time, so if you could stick to that question I asked. How often are you penalised for missing your KPIs?
We're penalised very seldom because we very seldom miss our KPIs.
So it's 3% of the time is the figure that I've heard. Is that correct?
It's
in the National Audit Office report.
Well, hung my hat on the National Audit Office report earlier in the session, so I think I can't really depart from it now. But generally speaking, we deliver over 99% of our contract.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and that makes sense to the other two people at 3%?
The performance is scrutinised by Home Office on a monthly basis, and matters discussed. I can advise you that we've paid in KPI penalties 441,000 across the...
Okay, so and Mr Lakey, for you at Clearsprings, given that 15% of your properties are deemed uninhabitable and 1% is deemed 1 in 50 is deemed unsafe, and also just to come back on your earlier point, you said the reason that you had the highest numbers in response to the member for Clapham was because you had the highest volume, but that's not true. That's not what's in the reporting. It's adjusted per resident overpopulation, so I don't understand that. How many times have you been penalised?
I don't have the exact figures here.
Would 3% sound appropriate?
But yeah, probably not far away.
Okay, so how much does that penalisation amount to? What's the number the Home Office gets back in response?
I've indicated 441,000 for Mears so far.
Okay, so, and for the other ones?
I don't have the exact figures.
According to the National Audit Office, it adds up to £4 million. That sound right across the three of you?
Probably.
So out of profits of £383 million in a total revenue system of £7 billion, for all the failures you are responsible for, you've been fined £4 million. Yeah? So if, as is currently projected over the rest of this contract, the costs overall to the taxpayer of this were to double to £15 billion, on current trends, you can expect to only be paying £8 million if nothing changes. To me, that sounds like a huge profit opportunity for your companies. Would you agree with that assessment?
I personally wouldn't. I think the KPI performance is a reflection of performance, and it does, it is an incredibly challenging contract, but we strive and work very hard to meet all the criteria. Sometimes we fall short.
Let's just focus in on those criteria for a second, because this contract was started in 2019. Obviously, costs have gone up hugely since then. But quite a lot of things happened in the interim that you have been using to justify those cost increases: a pandemic, government legislation, access to accommodation, multiple reasons. Have any of the KPIs been adjusted at all as you've massively expanded into hotels? Any new KPIs added?
We're currently in discussions with the Home Office.
But retrospectively, have they been over that time?
Not today.
No. And then a final question, are there any safeguarding KPIs?
No safeguarding KPIs, no.
Oh, so that's not part of the contract?
Not part of the contract. Okay. In terms of KPIs. There are requirements for safeguarding, in the contract.
It's not an indicator you're assessed against by the Home Office?
It's not quantified.
No.
It's not quantified.
But we do invest in it.
Significantly.
Maguire.
Thanks, Chair. I know that Steve earlier touched on Robbie's question. You gave some answers about extra services, and I don't think it was entirely clear what were provided by charities, what were provided by yourself. So maybe another chance to have a go at that, and whether you could tell us if you ever go beyond contractual requirements to deliver accommodation in an effective way, and why you do that, and hope you'll get some answers from Jason and Claudia.
Sure. Yes, I think so. So there are the hotel services in terms of additional support, welfare support, social activities, which is really designed to kind of manage the situation and manage the people and the venue. But there are a number of other things that we've done. So, for example, we are working with a number of local authorities on some joint accommodation projects to try and get more dispersed accommodation live and over the line. We work a lot on the medium-size units at the moment and trying to bring those on and bring those in line. So there's been a fair bit of work around that. But specifically around the service users, it's mostly in the hotels and those kind of sites, and it's based around that social interaction and making sure that people are not going to just sat there all day waiting.
Very similar in terms of the interaction with the service users and integration into the society. But I would flag that we go above and beyond, certainly in relation to safeguarding of service users. Our team is significantly over the contract requirement in terms of their training and support, and I think that's a very, very important part of some of the service provision that we provide, because it's a huge challenge, as we know. The added problem of increasing capacity within hotels sometimes has a negative impact on that area, and that's where we put our resource and we focus in on that, and I would say that that's certainly above and beyond.
Can you give an example of that you mentioned at the end in an area where there's a hotel that your last point there, you put in extra resources in an area where you have hotels?
So safeguarding and welfare, where we have a provision and offering across the entire contract, and obviously that includes people in DA, but we have a higher proportion of our welfare and safeguarding team focused in hotels, and in addition to the work that they just do in the hotels and actually responding to incidents, we have considerable engagement with stakeholders in the community. So to give you an example, in North East and Yorkshire and Humber in March, I think our team engaged with 57 external meetings with stakeholders, including police, local authorities, charities, all adding and trying to help understand the issues that our service users are experiencing, trying to work forward and finding ways to assist them and to keep that balance, and that's over and above.
Is that a preemptive measure that you take at all of your locations, or just afterwards where there's been any particular issues?
That's across the board. We do that proactively across the board.
I'd love to give you a couple of illustrations of some of the sort of the non-contractual things we do. One that I am particularly proud of is that we draw on our experience and our expertise, our capability in other sectors, to put to the benefit of the asylum accommodation. So, for example, we developed a complex case management system drawing on our experience in the justice system, for example, which we use to ensure that people, we're providing accommodation for people who are highly vulnerable often. Many of them have experienced severe trauma. Many of them have been victims of torture or trafficking or modern slavery. And so we invest in safeguarding beyond what's contractual. We have quite significant safeguarding teams. They use a complex case management tool, which we then made available to the Home Office to roll out more widely. We invest in intelligence sharing so that we are active partners within the community for police, for public safety, for monitoring the safety of the people who are in our accommodation. I'm also very proud of some work that we've been doing around place-based pilots, working with specific local authorities beyond our contract to try to design for future services that involve integration, drawing our experience in other countries, to make the integration of our service users once they sort of receive leave to remain in the UK, to make that their integration as rapid and as comprehensive as possible, in a bid to build community cohesion. Really, we were very struck last summer during the riots about the importance of community cohesion and trying to find ways in which we could play our small part in trying to support the Home Office and other government departments in building cohesive communities within which asylum seekers can be seen as an asset, not a liability.
Sorry, what was the specific example you had of that cohesion that you were helping with in communities?
So the specific example that I used was, I referred to the riots last summer.
Yeah, but what steps were you taking as a specific example? So you said that you promote cohesion within communities.
So, for example, we're working with a big local authority in the northwest. It's probably better if I don't name it, but I'm happy to write to you about it. Looking at how we can support them in integrating asylum seekers into their communities, so that that community gets the incoming population that it wants and needs, and can see and welcome those arrivals. And
we know the benefits, but what specific steps are you taking to help that authority in the northwest with cohesion?
So we're helping them with the planning. We're helping them by identifying projects. For example, helping asylum seekers become employable more quickly. They're not allowed to work. They're not allowed paid employment, but finding ways in which they can be helped to prepare for employability, finding ways in which they can help get their professional qualifications from their country of origin ratified more rapidly, for example, so that when they receive the right to work, they can draw on their own professional qualifications. So a piece of work like that.
Serco staff doing that, helping them, training them and guiding them.
So that is Serco devising place-based pilots for local authorities to...
Serco providing that service, though, not just coming up with that strategy, but actually providing on the
ground. Mixture. Some of it provided on the ground, some of it convening services that we provide elsewhere, some of it harnessing the goodwill in communities, which is out there in many communities, harnessing that goodwill to have the most positive impact that is possible.
So we're just going to move on to a final topic of data sharing. But can I just ask you, you've referred that the majority of clients will get a positive decision and will be granted asylum. But we've been told that you don't know what the outcome is at any of your sites, and that actually, the client will be perhaps even taken off-site and into dispersal accommodation, and you won't know whether they've been given a positive decision or not. So how can you know that the majority are being given, or the vast majority are being given given the right to stay?
We don't know individual results.
Right.
But we are aware that, looking across the national picture, that there is a percentage of positive results which we extrapolate from.
That's just want to clarify. So, Chris Murray with the final question.
Thanks. I just want to ask a question about data sharing, because we heard from a lot of local authorities and local organisations that are trying to cope when you open hotels in their areas. That they've had real challenges in understanding what's going on and finding out. So I wanted to ask, why do you think they've got those concerns? And do you get guidance from the Home Office on what you can and can't share? And is that legible to you?
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. We do get a lot of pushback from local authorities regarding data sharing. I think that's fair to say. However, our position on that is very much guided by Home Office, who determine what we can and cannot provide, and when we do and don't provide it.
Would you both agree with that?
Yes.
I think so. I mean, for us, I think the key data sharing that would be useful would be to have greater visibility of forecasting of volumes, because this is a very volume-driven business. We don't get a lot of sort of forewarning about sort of what forecast there is about numbers coming through, and I'm sure the same would be true for local authorities.
And that actually is leads me to my next point, which is how the data that you get from the Home Office, is it timely and accurate in the way that you would want it? And I'm thinking specifically of those who are coming post-arrival, so they've been triaged already by the Home Office and ending up with you, because we've heard a lot of stories about age disputes in your accommodation, and so that hadn't been done properly upstream. And I just wondered if you had any comment on that.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, we would say that the level of data that we get sometimes is mixed. I can understand Home Office's challenge about getting really good quality data from the service users. We are given a service user form which is supposed to contain as much information as is available, and the quantity of information that we get is, it does vary, and it is mixed.
And then one final question to yourself from Clearsprings. There's been reports of 17 million paid by Clearsprings to an offshore consultancy with links to your owner. I wonder if you could shed any light on us for that and give us any explanation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So BSS, Bespoke Strategy Solutions, is the company in question. They're UAE registered company. They are owned by Graham King, outright our owner. And BSS invoices Clearsprings Group for services provided by Graham. I don't think we recognise the values necessarily, but that's what the chart is for.
What are those services? Sorry, I wasn't clear.
So that's Strategic Solution Services. So they're services provided by Graham as the chief exec to the group. So they're not part of Clearsprings Ready Homes. The payments don't come from Ready Homes. They come from the Clearsprings as a group company.
Which Clearsprings Ready Homes is part of?
Yes, but it's part of the group, but the payments and the to the Home Office and the profit share payments are calculated without any of that.
And just clarify again, what is a strategic service?
So the strategic services to the group, so providing strategy to the group of companies, among other things.
That's kind of hard to understand, but thanks anyway.
Okay, no problem.
That's exhausted our questions. Is there any other points that you wish to make to the committee before we conclude? Any of you?
No, thank you.
I think we've established probably, I hope to everybody's satisfaction, that this is a complex and very challenging operating environment. I would just like to say that I think the Home Office as a customer is in a very difficult task that they have to fulfil. As a former senior civil servant myself, I know what I'm looking at when I look at senior civil servants. And I think it's fair to say that the calibre of senior civil servants that I operate with in the Home Office is very high. It's consistently very high. They are managing a very difficult policy area with great determination to do it well. And I think it would be a pity if they received no credit for the efforts that they're making.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for your time. We've just come in on the 2 hours, so I do appreciate that you. We started a little late, but I appreciate you staying. And that concludes the session. Order.